fine. Okay, now let's get to the real gun violence statistics. So what we've been hearing is gun violence is constantly on the increase. People are being murdered on a scale that boggles the imagination. School shootings are increasing, and your child is, if not likely going to die, has a high likelihood of being shot at a school. This is not true. Okay, gun deaths in the United States have been radically declining since 1993. According to the Centers for Disease Control, there were 7 gun-related homicides for every 100,000 Americans in 1993. By 2013, that number had been sliced in half to 3.6 homicides per 100,000 population. During that same period, the number of privately owned firearms in the United States doubled from 185 million to 357 million privately owned firearms in the United States. So the number of arms in the United States was going like this, and the amount of gun crime in the United States was going like that. And yet everybody in the media seems to assume that more guns means more crime. You're going to have to explain then why more guns does not mean more crime. Okay, where do all of these... Also, quick note, they say there are 33,000 gun-related deaths in the United States. They neglect to mention that 2/3 of these are suicide. About 8,000, 9,000 gun-related homicides in the United States. The vast majority of gun-related deaths are people who are killing themselves. And it is very easy to substitute another method for killing yourself. Okay. Where do gun-involved deaths take place? So the idea from the left is that states that have lax gun laws have higher rates of gun crime. This is not true. Gun-involved deaths take place in mostly America's major cities. So all those hicks from the sticks, you know, the people who actually own all the guns, those aren't the people who are killing each other. Okay, this is all happening in cities, in major American cities. Virtually all of these major American cities are governed by one party, and I will let you guess which party that is. Almost 60% of all American firearm homicides occur in the 62 cities of the country's largest metros. In order of gun homicide, gun-related death: New Orleans, Detroit, Las Vegas, Miami, Baltimore, St. Louis, Richmond, Memphis, Cleveland, and Philadelphia. That is 9 Democrat mayors and 1 Republican mayor, the only Republican being in Miami. The single strongest predictor of rates of gun death by a wide margin is actually race, unfortunately. Okay, Richard Florida writes, the share of the population that is black is positively related to both the overall rate of gun death and even more so with gun-related homicides. Now, let it be noted, I am not suggesting that black people are inherently more likely to kill each other, because that's stupid and racist. What I am suggesting is that culture has a high likelihood of causing homicide. And culture differs. Okay, you can look in poor white communities. There's a higher rate of homicide there as well. Cultural issues and poverty in major American cities factor into gun death. Guns are not the chief reason for gun death. In other words, you need bad people picking up guns in order for those guns to fire themselves. I have 2 guns at home. I have a 9mm and I have a shotgun. Neither one of them has killed anyone. Neither one of them has popped out of my safe and shot anyone. And neither one of them is going to, because it's my safe and I have the key. Okay, rifles versus handguns. People keep talking about banning rifles. The left is very focused on banning rifles, which is a really weird thing to do when you think about it, considering that rifles are not more dangerous than handguns. In 2014, there were 8,100 total firearm homicides. Fully 5,500 were committed with a handgun. 248 total were committed with a rifle. Okay, so you're significantly more likely to die, if you're in a gun-related incident, from a handgun gunshot than you are from a rifle gunshot. And you're more likely to die from a blunt object, from being hit with a fist, than you are to be killed by a rifle. 660 people that year were killed with hands or fists, or feet, like Bruce Lee, right? How about the idea that rifles are inherently more dangerous? Of course, rifles have a greater muzzle velocity. Of course that's true. That's what rifles are made for, but that is not what is predominantly used in crime. And as for school shootings, the idea that school shootings are on the rise is also not true. There was a study that came out just in the last couple of days showing that the number of school shootings has actually been in significant decline. Since 2012, according to the Gun Violence Archive, 138 people have been killed in school shootings. That does include the Parkland Massacre, and it includes any incident that took place on a school campus during times where students or faculty were on the ground. So somebody shot themselves. It wasn't even a mass shooting. It's 138 people total. So between 15 and 20 people per year are killed on school grounds, which means that 2.6% of all youth homicides occur at school. Your child is about 40 times more likely to die from getting into your medicine cabinet or into some other household product than they are from being shot after you drop them off at school, as Leon Wolf points out over at the Blaze. And according to researchers at Northeastern University, mass school shootings are extremely rare. 4 times as many children were killed in schools in the early 1990s as they are today. None of this is to make light of anything that's happened. None of this is to suggest that every school shooting is not a tragedy. but it is to suggest that the lie that is being promulgated out there, that there's a school shooting every day in America. You heard this. There were 18 school shootings, 18 mass shootings in the first month of the new year. It's just not true. It's just a lie. It's made up. Every town for gun violence, for gun safety, puts this stuff out, and it's not true. It's statistically false. Mass shootings more broadly are also not happening all that often in the United States. In fact, on a per capita basis, the United States does not rank number one in deaths from mass shooting in the Western world. Okay, actually, the United States ranks 11th. From 2009 to 2015, here are countries that ranked above the United States in mass shooting deaths rates per million. Norway, Serbia, and France. Mass shooting frequency, we rank number 12, after Austria, France, Switzerland, and Norway. And here's the thing about using mass shootings as a proxy for this discussion anyway. Mass shootings are a really bad way to go about having a gun control discussion because they are not representative of gun violence in totality. The victims tend to be younger. The victims tend to be more racially diverse. The perpetrators tend to be a little bit younger. Most gun murder victims are between the ages of 15 to 34, for example. 2/3 of those gun victims are black in the United States. Okay, in mass shootings, it's racially diverse. So why are we using mass shootings as a proxy to have a discussion about broader gun violence? It doesn't make any sense, except that the media like to choose hotspot, really ugly incidents they can focus on so that then they can claim that all of us don't have sympathy for people who were killed. So Alyssa Milano came out and tweeted about the Second Amendment. And what she tweeted about the Second Amendment was a particularly stupid thing. So what she tweeted out was, it said, she said, also popular in 1791, the year the Second Amendment was adopted. And then it's a list of things. Slavery, the 3/5 compromise, bloodletting, lead paint, being literally owned by your husband, cholera, smallpox, typhus, dying in childbirth, a lot, using chamber pots, unsanitary surgical procedures, traveling by horse or foot, dying at the age of 40. Things change, y'all. We can do better. Okay, I wasn't aware that smallpox was actually popular in 1791. People had smallpox parties. They got together and they said, oh, you got that hot smallpox? Pass it on, man. Just hand me the smallpox. Dying in childbirth. Also not aware that that was supremely popular in 1791. I think people saw that as bad in 1791. Even slavery, which was popular in certain parts of the United States in 1791, was certainly not popular in certain other parts of the United States in 1791. But if you're going to talk about things that are in the Constitution of the United States, which seems to me closer than smallpox to resemblance to the Second Amendment, you might try the First Amendment. You know some other things that were popular in 1791? Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, no quartering of troops, no illegal search and seizures, a right to a jury trial, a right against torture. Right? These were things that were pretty popular in 1791. It turns out, because they're in that same document. You stupid idiot. So again, there's a notion on the left that all of time began with their birth. I remember that Barack Obama said something about how what Bill Ayers did before he met Bill Ayers was irrelevant because Bill Ayers basically didn't exist as a human. Right? Bill Ayers did all this stuff when I was a kid. Okay, so what? So what? The world didn't start turning when you were born. But folks on the left seem to think that all of the good things in life began just spontaneously when they were born or discovered them, and that they never pre-existed that. The same ideology, the same philosophy that brought you freedom of speech and freedom of religion brought you the right to keep and bear arms. They were part and parcel of the same philosophy. As far as the notion that the 3/5 compromise was some sort of ideological commitment to the non-peoplehood of black people, that's idiocy. If you look at the actual negotiations over the 3/5 compromise, which is a bad provision of the Constitution, the reason that it is in the Constitution is because it was there to prevent a worst provision of the Constitution, which would have been counting black people as full people for purposes of voting, but counting them as property for purposes of not being able to actually vote or do anything. That's what the South wanted. The South wanted, slave owners wanted, that if there were a bunch of black folks who were living in slavery in South Carolina, for purposes of representation in the Congress, for South Carolina, black folks would be counted as people, but they would not be able to vote and they would still be considered property. And the North said, no, we're not going to do that. You don't get to count black people as full people, excuse me, because it skews the representative sample. If the North had caved to that and said, sure, black people are full people for purposes of representation, but not people for purposes of property, guess what? Slavery would have lasted longer because the South would have had more votes in the Congress. But again, knowledge and history